The Confessional is brought to you by Locker Room, the groundbreaking fan engagement platform turning your physical touchpoints into digital access points. With a simple scan of QR codes or tap on NFC-enabled merchandise, your once anonymous followers become active members with verified fan IDs across your whole ecosystem. Connect fans globally through matchday rituals, vibrant communities, exclusive content and experiences, rewards, digital memories, and much more. Own the relationship, own the data, compound fan value, and unlock direct revenue streams from your biggest supporters. Find out more at www.lockerroom.app. And now, on with the show.
I'm Roger Mitchell, and this again is The Confessional. Today we're very lucky. We've got a very, very special friend of this podcast and a great colleague. We've got Mr. Giles Morgan, one of the most accomplished and well-known operators in the sports sector, not just in the UK, principally in sponsorship, but not only, done a lot of work in sport tech. I met Giles, 7 years ago now, when he very graciously agreed to come on the first season of Are You Not Entertained, the podcast. And we all thought he was great, and we asked him to become a co-host for season 2 with that infamous show, The Groundsman. And I would like to say that that really kicked on our podcast, and that's the merit of Giles in what he brought as a co-host, but also his ability to have people come on and trust us. That wouldn't have happened without us. I may be biased, but I think the podcast industry for sport kind of like changed from that second series of The Groundsman onwards, when, you know, Giles brought on Jerry Cardinale, brought on Barry Hearn, Al Guido, George Pine. All of these things kind of like kicked on quite a lot. So a really, really great colleague. But that's not all. You know, since then, Giles has, you know, gone back into the corporate world. His first stint, what he's mainly best known for is with HSBC. Then he went back in to do the British Lions with Howden, which was a massive success. And he's now started the third season of his own version of Are You Not Entertained podcast, The Captain's Table, which is a great addition to everything that we do. Now, Giles is a personality that I've known him as. I've, from the start, kind of thought of him a little bit as the milk tray man. Strong, imposing physique, big smile, charming. Definitely a big personality. Now, some may say maybe too much of a big personality. I guess we'll find out today. But Giles Morgan, welcome to The Confessional.
Well, Roger, thank you for those very, very kind words. It's very odd to be on this side of the microphone, having the questions thrown my way, but I'm tentatively really looking forward to it.
Well, you know the format, Giles, of The Confessional, this rather unusual show. I'm asking you, are you nervous? Do you think I'm going to like set you up? Are you trepidation?
Yeah, I think a bit of soul searching. I obviously know some of the guests that you've had who've come before, and it's interesting. I think all of them would have had the same trepidation. It's quite revealing to yourself when you're thinking about the kind of answers that you want to give, which are honest, which requires self-honesty, and therefore probably quite a lot of self-deprecation as well. If you're looking in the mirror, then to do it in front of an audience of people and your peers and people you respect in the industry. Yeah, I was shit scared, actually.
That's a great answer. And you summarise it very well. You know, I always say to everybody before they come on, I always say, look, this isn't live. You know, if I'm doing a good job at some point, you will forget that it's beyond just the two of us, and you will say some things that if you really feel you want to, we can edit out afterwards. I have to say no guest has taken that up yet. So whatever has been put out on The Confessional was as it was said in the studio. So let's kick off, my friend. I was delighted to be able to do this. For what and to whom do you need to ask forgiveness, Giles?
Well, there was a flippant answer, which was anyone I've ever played golf with, because particularly in my heyday working for the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, I played so much golf so badly, and I think terrorized people not just on my fairway, but fairways to the left and to the right. But then I thought about it, obviously seriously. One of the things I used to hear all of the time at HSBC is, of the 250,000 odd people who work in that great company, is that I had the best job in the bank. And ostensibly you could see why. It's the Minister of Fun at Hogwarts, it's the head of the colouring in department, it's all of those things. But I think anyone who works brand side, particularly for a major multinational, but anyone really in marketing, you know that you have to give your heart and soul, and you have to believe in the brand that you are pushing out there in the world. And with that comes a certain amount of, you become a kind of corporate whore a little bit, where you are just, no matter what, the red and white of this particular company, it could be any company, but for me it was HSBC, was all pervasive. It became everything. And I became very addicted to that. And I got very addicted to the invitations, to flying around the world in the pointy end of the plane, to having everybody laugh at my jokes, to have everybody thinking that I had the checkbook that was going to answer many dreams in the world of sport and entertainment, etc. And also, the actual reality is you don't make the decision. You're an internal consultant and you have to go up to a higher body. But when you went out into the big bad world with that checkbook, it was very easy. And I certainly succumbed to feeling quite pleased with myself, I think it would be fair to say. And in 2013, I was asked by the then CEO and the then chairman of the bank if I would run the bank's 150th anniversary, which was really the whole of 2015, for a significant sum of money, mainly going to charity, but a bank-wide celebration and honour of that venerable institution, which is almost, if you're in the colouring in department, that's almost the ultimate flattery. I had done a history degree. I'm very interested in history, and I'd done Chinese history at university. So I couldn't believe my luck. And the catch came that I would move to Hong Kong, which for people who know HSBC is the spiritual heartland of the bank. And I was so caught up, I think it would be fair to say, with my own sense of importance to the bank, and that I was a real bank man, that I jumped at the chance and moved myself out to Hong Kong with barely a thought that I had two young children living in Cambridge with their mother. I was divorced, but they were, I think, I'm going to say 9 and 11. And I spent the next 3 years in Hong Kong orchestrating what was a phenomenal project for the bank, a big project. It was probably not far off $1 billion worth of donations and big events. And I realize, retrospectively, that the damage I may have caused my children in terms of not being at home, not being there for them, not being dad. At the time, I had a very strong, their mother is a very, very capable and brilliant mum. But I miss them, and I know they miss me, and I willingly did it. And whilst there would be those who argue, well, it was your career, you were trying to do the right thing. And having left that organisation very happily and still very close to the bank, but realising that the bank is not the be-all and end-all, that your job is not the be-all and end-all, that actually family and your friends and the people that matter in life are the be-all and end-all, and that's all that matters. I will always have a sense of regret that I did that, and the forgiveness I want, and I know a lot of people have talked about their family, but it's actually to my 2 children, because they may not have known it, it may have been their normal, but they missed out on a chunk of their father, and I did it willingly, and I did it knowingly. And if I had my time again, I wouldn't have done it.
That is a tremendous, tremendous answer. It's similar to, because I don't know what you're going to say. So I have to think a little bit what you could say and what I'm going to ask next. The thing I was going to say next is linked to this. You mentioned a little bit in that answer about, I don't know whether you want to call it ego or hubris, but do you think the power that you had with that checkbook and the kind of flattery that you were getting from the entire sports industry, do you think that changed you at a crucial moment of your adulthood and your fatherhood? Did it make you a different person?
In some ways, it was the making of me. It gave me a lot of confidence. God forbid I needed confidence, but it gave me an inner confidence that I could do these things. I'd never been a high achiever, particularly at school. I was a large rugby player rather than a good rugby player. I was a noisy piano player rather than a talented one. I was no academic, but I enjoyed writing. HSBC gave me the opportunity to believe in myself. That was a good thing. But inevitably sycophancy, and for me it was a little taste of what pure fame must be like. Not on a global sense, obviously. Probably only 1,000 people in the world would know that name at that time, but it was the sports industry. But to that 1,000 people, you were definitely carried around on a chieftain's shield. And that became addictive. The chauffeur cars became addictive. All the trappings. And as I say, the not quite knowing who was real. And I remember, I think it was Dame Judi Dench, the great British actress, saying the worst thing about fame is that you don't know everybody when you're out there, but they know something about you. And I think that in the sports industry happened to me, is that I think people were second guessing me and I didn't really know. And I wouldn't say regret it, but if I'd had my time again, I would be much more wary of it.
Well, you in many ways, you did have your time again at Howden in a similarly important role. Howden wasn't just a sponsor of the British Lions. It's got a whole portfolio that you expanded when you were there. I want to press you a little bit on this, Giles, because you wouldn't be on this show if I didn't have a lot of respect for you. Let's be clear on this. But I love the fact that we all have our journeys and that we're all sinners. A Catholic has to believe that. After HSBC, you like a lot of us go into the world of, more of a kind of like eat what you kill economy. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. Sometimes you don't get the rewards that you put in, and that's a humbling experience. But then you go back to Howden. What was it like going back the second time with the kind of like, the humbling experience in between the HSBC thing?
I think what was very different between HSBC and Howden is that HSBC is obviously a very old, very established organisation with an awful lot of current senior management as well as previous senior management. And everyone has a role and you very quickly learn what your role is and you're left to get on with it. Howden is an extraordinary company. David Howden, who is the founder and the CEO of the company, is totemic to the whole business. And therefore, he was very much the front man for the Lions. It was very much his family name on the Lions shirt. He is very passionate about many things, whether it be sport, entertainment, music, as well as insurance, obviously. So in a sense, it was different, is that this was always going to be David's show. It was very much about putting his brand, his name out there and using the Lions as a vehicle. And having had the HSBC experience, it was much easier for me just more to be there to guide the company of the right way to do the sponsorship. But anyone who's stood in an audience and watched David Howden perform with a speech of welcoming, which normally are the most diabolically boring type of things in normal corporate environments where the CEO or chairman stand up and bore everyone to death talking about half-year results. Not this guy. He absolutely could take a crowd and make them lean in. So I think partly having been on cloud nine with HSBC, then as you say, having the de-acceleration of being out of HSBC, I was much more reflective that this was a job I was being asked. It was Elliot Richardson, who is a great friend of the show and a great friend of both of ours, who'd been instrumental in the introduction. He had made sure that that had happened. David had talked to him about the Lions, and Elliot knew that I'd done 4 tours before, so I kind of knew the sketch. I was really happy to let David have the front of the stage because he needed to. It's his business. I think I was there quietly behind the scenes, just giving him kind of some of the tips and experience to do it. And the company responded magnificently. I really just pulled a few strings and let the company get on with it.
The 2 people you mentioned at Howden there, Elliot Richardson and David Howden, are both British, and Britain has got a class system. It still does. Some people, in fact, you yourself have often called certain sports the posh sports as opposed to others. You tell little stories about, Barry Hearn or Alex Ferguson both pulling your leg, saying that you won't get anywhere in football with a name like Giles. I'm just exploring a little bit more this whole thing about confidence and superiority and an idea. You went to public school, which isn't a sin. I sent my son to public school. I'm just trying to work out, Giles, and I'm coming around to a compliment here. You are a mate of Barry Hearn. You've got on with a lot of people that I would call much more working class or lower middle class, but you can also do it with the posh folk. Is that all things to all men, or is that just the skill you need to have in dealing with a relationships industry like sport?
Gosh, that's a great question. I'm naturally meritocratic. I respect people who I think are good at things, particularly things I can't do, and there are many of those. So in a sense, in the sports industry, which I think is quite democratic, certainly from a class point of view, there are some arrogant bastards out there, but I don't think it necessarily comes from having a landed gentry type of title. I think it just comes from there are some arrogant folk and there are others. I like the sports industry because it is everybody can a bit like sport. It should be classless, and I enjoy that. I think where that comes from is my late father, who actually died when I was 20 years old, but it was a colossal character. He was a Welsh farmer's boy who pulled himself up from nowhere to do very well, ended up at Slaughter and May and then running an investment bank. But he came from Brecon. He didn't come from anywhere. And he was a firm believer in my young childhood, which was smile with your eyes, not just a firm handshake, but look forward to meeting people and give everybody a chance. And I think if I've learned anything from way back when of being a young boy with a very strong, he was an enormous character, is celebrate people and respect the people that you admire. So working for a company like Howden was an absolute gift because there are all sorts of people there. It's a company growing at topsy speed. It's extraordinary. But to have characters like Elliot, who is, as we all know, is a massive character and not someone to cross.
Doesn't suffer fools.
He really does not. And I've been on the wrong side of Elliot from time to time. And my God, he's let me know it. But that's okay. I respect that. Same with David Howden. He is ebullient. He's warm. He's friendly. But boy, he can let you have it. And that's good. That to me is the kind of operating world I want to be part of. Is, I would say that with you and I, Rog, is we've known each other, as you say, for 7 years. We've done a lot of it on screen, but we've also broken bread in Como, in London and other places. We don't always agree. You don't always agree. I like that because it providing you're not falling out, it's about respect and listening to others. So I'm a meritocrat fundamentally. It's kind of been hardwired into me. That's why the sports industry works. And it's why I think HSBC, funnily enough, not particularly a class-ridden bank at all, not like some of the older, grander British banks. It came from very much young kids in 1865 going out from red brick universities to go and find fame and fortune in Hong Kong. It's kind of sink or swim mentality, and that's kind of fits my ethos, I think.
Okay. Last little bit on this first question, a little bit of a bouncer. you come across to me, as many people do in sport, because sport is male dominated, as very comfortable as one of the lads. In fact, one of the leaders of one of the lads type things. Do we as an industry have a problem with women, working with women?
I think there is a problem in the industry working with women, and you know, what we've seen in recent years with women's sport, particularly professional women's sport, being much more on the agenda, which is good, providing it, you know, obviously it's got to be commercially viable. I don't, and again, I'm not trying to paint myself as sort of perfection. I really am not. But my late mother, who died a couple of years ago, played tennis at Wimbledon. She was a member of the All England Club for many, many years, lived in Wimbledon. And she was only about 5'3", but she was an absolute hard ass, half Scottish, took absolutely zero prisoners. And when I got the HSBC job, she was very, very clear to me, even though it was none of her business. I think I was at least 35. I even could tie my own shoelaces. She was very clear to me that this role, that there was an opportunity for me to really champion women's sport through HSBC. And when I look back on what HSBC are doing now, 21 years on from when I started, so it's a long way back. Everything that HSBC got involved with in my time, golf, sponsored women's champions and men's champions, rugby sevens, men and women, badminton, men and women. One of the proudest things I achieved, and it was entirely down to my mother, was when HSBC became the patron of the Open Golf Championship in 2010. And that was at a time when 9, I think, of the 10 courses were male-only golf clubs. It was stipulated that if they wanted HSBC's money, they would have to change the governance of those clubs so that men and women could play. Otherwise, they wouldn't be getting the Hong Kong, Shanghai banking money. That came from my mother. She said, you cannot do this. And I now look forward. You know, sometimes you don't know the journey we've all been on until you look back. I now see that HSBC was miles ahead of the zeitgeist today about this promotion. And not everybody in the bank was pro it in terms of some of the things that were being done. So I don't feel it. That doesn't mean that I don't like being Jack the Lad. And yes, I love being in the middle of a bar, inevitably playing the piano, which seems to be the hallmark that everybody knows me by. But I've definitely worked with more women than men in my career, particularly on the agency side. And again, meritocracy. I'm much more interested in having fun with people and getting a good job done rather than worrying about where they come from. That being said, I still think that there's much work to be done within the industry.
Good. Second question, what's the deal you wish you hadn't done?
Well, having spent so much money in the past, other people's money, shareholders' money, most of them I'm pretty comfortable with, and they were good. Sponsorship is actually quite a simple formula. It's an answer to a business question, a business need. That's what it should be there for. However, there was one time at around 2007 when HSBC, you'll remember this well, Roger, they had bought Household and they had a subprime business which caused quite a lot of damage to the bank a year later. Not as much as to some
others, but yeah.
No, but they still took, I think it cost them about 50 or 60 billion, not chump change. Anyway, I had gone to New York because we were looking to do a big women's golf tournament. And I don't think I was quite propositioned in a bar. It wasn't that bad, but someone had said, the subprime, Florida, big thing, big opportunity. Why don't you sponsor some high school football in Florida?
You have to forgive me. You just put together the women's golf tournament and propositioned in a bar, and I just went off. My mind went in the completely wrong direction there.
Yeah.
That's your fault. That's not mine.
I was in New York trying to focus on a women's golf tournament. And someone came up to me and said, "How about get involved with high school American football for some really, really big high schools down in Florida?" Well, I got terribly overexcited, and I don't remember the check that was written, but it was a good chunk of cash to support a few high schools playing American football. Cost far too much. Had absolutely zip effect at the time. No one was interested. And to make matters worse, the global financial crisis happened about 3 months later. And I feel I contributed to a hefty waste of money for the bank. And it really taught me a lesson. That was the time I learned that sponsorship investment, it should be entirely objective, not subjective, obviously. It should be entirely underpinned by business needs, objective needs that are pre-approved at a very high level within an organization. It isn't just about brand, it's about employee, it's about customer, it's all of those things, because I was given the most almighty bollocking for spunking this money away from someone who was really very scary because he was the group CEO. And I knew that I had blemished my copybook, not so much about the spend, because to that company, it wasn't really about the money. It was the thoughtlessness of it. And I never forgot that lesson. So
that was one of the things I was going to ask you about. I've got it written down here. It must have been hard working for Doer Canny Scots at HSBC, given your kind of personality. That must have been a hell of a learning curve for you.
Yeah, it took me 3 years. It took me, and they say that HSBC stands for Home for Scottish Bankers and Clerks, as you probably remember. It has a wonderful, or maybe did, I'm not so much sure now, probably, but had a very puritanical Scottish ethos that ran right from 1865 when Sir Thomas Sutherland, an Aberdonian, set up the bank. And that made it quite special because it meant that everybody was thinking carefully about the value to the business. Now, I'll give you an example. Sir Willie Purvis, one of the great Scottish bankers who was the mastermind of the Midland acquisition back in, I think, 1991. He was very, very part of the Hong Kong Sevens, which is a sort of staple of the Hong Kong world in April every year. And it was Willie who used to say to employees, look, go and have a party, go and have fun. But if you're not at your desk at 8:15 on a Monday morning, you'll be fired. So there was always that sense of probity, of doing the right thing. And so it did take a little while to get into the pace. You couldn't be flash at HSBC. You were not, it wasn't about you. It was about the bank. Once you learnt and earned the trust, and I think I probably had to break a few eggs, which I think I did in Florida, and take a couple of slaps.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I had a housemaster at school, and I asked him once, I said, why is it that his heads of houses, for those who don't know the public school system, no Hogwarts, it's the same kind of idea. And I said, why was it that most of his heads of houses had been naughty boys, people who'd got it wrong? And he said, because if you're asking people to patrol the line and know where not to cross it, you need to have people who've crossed the line before so they know where it is. And I think that was very good advice. I think sometimes the bank wanted you to get a little bit wrong so that they could pull you back. So I loved it. I had a Scottish grandfather on my mother's side. I got it. It was about doing the right thing, doing it well, but not being flash about it.
That's great. Great story. It is a great story. In HSBC, they actually, when I was working at James Capel, they had just bought James Capel, which was their part of Big Bang. So in some ways, we were colleagues also in the HSBC group. Third question. Who is the person you wish you had never met?
Well, I thought about this one. I mean, there are a number of people who probably feel the same way, but there are two, and I'll do one very quickly. They say never meet your heroes. I grew up with Welsh rugby. The two great heroes in the 70s of mine were Sir Gareth Edwards, who I've worked with a lot and is one of the most charming men in the world. But the other was the fullback JPR Williams, the doctor, the butcher of Swansea. And I met him a few times, and he really was my hero. He played with his socks down, hard bastard.
He was to all of us, yeah.
And he died not that long ago, sadly. But I met him on 3 or 4 occasions, and for whatever reason, doesn't really matter what, he was a total twat to me. And I was so disappointed by my hero not being very nice to me. I hadn't done anything other than maybe I hadn't given him a gig with the Lions or whatever it was. I never found out. But I was it was not so much that he was, I'm sure he's a lovely bloke. I was just devastated. And I wish I just never met him, because he would remain in my pantheon as Dr. John Peter Rhys-Williams, the great fullback. The other person, which this is probably more of a lower tone, but in my early career, when I was agency side, I was asked to do a whole lot of booking of celebrities for a charity wheelchair event that was going around the United Kingdom, around about 93, 94, something like that. And my job was to book famous people and get on the phone. And I remember I got Sir Alec Ferguson first time I met him, and he was very good and agreed to come along. And there were a bunch of people, all sorts of different people. But the person who started off this charity event, which was to raise money for Stoke Mandeville Hospital, was Jimmy Savile, Sir Jimmy Savile.
Jesus.
So I get on the call.
Wasn't expecting that.
No. I ring. I'm 24 years old, and I'm ringing this bloke called Jimmy Savile.
Bit
I
too
knew
old
him.
for him.
He was, yeah, I'm a lot of things I don't think. Anyway, he answered the phone, and we negotiated a deal. He'd come down, and I'll never forget it. This was a guy who was a national treasure right back then. I mean, he was one of the biggest names of all, and I was nervous. I hadn't really done this stuff before, but he wanted to be paid in Cuban cigars, not cash, which I never forgot. £6,000 worth of Cuban cigars. Anyway, got to the start of this event, and I was there to meet him and introduce him to various people. And all he had to do was to go, ready, steady, go. And these athletes would be pushing their wheelchairs off around the country. It wasn't very much, but I probably spent 2 hours with him. And he was wearing a purple shell suit with that mad hair and yellow kind of Ali G sunglasses things. And I have never in my life felt such a malevolent spirit. And I'm not someone who knows ghosts or shit like that. But he was horrific. He was arrogant. He was also, I'm a big guy. He wasn't as big as I am, but he was a former wrestler. He was physically imposing. He was unpleasant to people. And he had these eyes. And I knew nothing.
My God.
This was nothing like I knew that there was, what he was doing. It was not that. But I had this absolute tremor of, this is like a dog. Sometimes they say dog. No, It was extraordinary. And he was graceless, charmless, arrogant. And I remember thinking to myself, if I never met that man again, that would be a good day. And it stuck with me when I was thinking about that question.
Those are two great answers. We'll leave Jimmy Savile aside. Less said about that, the better. But let's come back to the JPR Williams one, because I was guessing, as I have to guess on these things, that you may have mentioned Jack Nicklaus, which is similar to JPR, who didn't take a liking to you either. Now, you can explain the background to that if you want, but my question is, it's an interesting one, Giles. Why do some people not take a liking to you? And then why do most people, take a strong liking to you? Is it a Marmite thing in there, or is it the accent? Why did Jack not like you?
Well, there's the old gag. Why do they take an instant dislike to you to save time? I think Jack didn't like me. But do you know what's interesting? So the background story to that very quickly is that HSBC was sponsoring a global business summit in Ponte Vedra in Florida, the home of the PGA Tour. And I was asked if I would interview Jack Nicklaus at this conference in front of a live television audience. I've never done it in my life before, but I was up for it. I thought it'd be fun, and it was HSBC's conference. One, I'll never forget it because it gave me a confidence to do the sort of stuff that we've done on Are You Not Entertained, i.e. talking to people. But also it was a big moment because Guy Kinnings, who's now head of the DP World Tour, introduced me to the great man who came in with his entourage and lackeys. He was half deaf in one ear, I think. I mean, he probably still is in both ears. I have no idea. But he could not understand my accent or get my name. Giles, what sort of stupid name is that? And then when I was interviewing him, they had put the chairs the wrong round, and his deaf ear was near my mouth. So he could not hear a word I was saying. To compound things, his agent, which I think was one of his many sons, he's like Jacob, I think, in Joseph. I think he's got many sons, tribes, whatever, had said, you've got to talk about the type of grass on Jack Nicklaus design and all the rest of it for 45 minutes. I mean, I had no interest in golf, let alone golf grass. And 20 minutes in, he is literally not hearing a word I'm saying. He's answering the wrong questions. And I'm thinking, this is disaster. And he is looking at me with scorn of this sort of tall, posh English bloke just giving it chat. Anyway, I think, fuck this for a game of soldiers. I can't do any more. So I just turned to him, I ripped everything up, and I said, Jack, tell me, what song do you sing in the shower? And he looked at me. He said, well, what do you mean? And I said, what song do you sing in the shower? Everyone sings in the shower. He went, well, Sweet Caroline. And then the interview changed. And that actually, it was the inspiration later for the captain's table. We had a chat about normal shit.
That's
and he
great.
was then charming. But I think maybe his dislike of me was accent, deafness, and the fact I couldn't ask him any sensible questions about a golf course, largely because I've never been on a fairway.
We haven't played golf, but we should do that because
wear a crash helmet, my friend.
No, I think that might be worse than you. I've got a sensation about that. Right, here's the fourth one. This is interesting. I'm really curious to see what you say here because I've got an idea about what I would say if I was you. What trade do you think you missed or were late for in life?
Well, I really thought about this one. They're all tough questions and they required a lot of thinking. I think on reflection, I went on at HSBC 2 to 3 years too long, if I look back on my career. And I did that because I had been asked to do this 2015 anniversary and I was choked by the ego of doing it. But I'd already done 10 years by 2015 and I'd done it all. I'd built a portfolio. I'd worked well with the high hegians at the bank. And I was beginning to get some quite interesting job offers. And I didn't take them. I sort of decided that I would.
Can I ask, like what?
Yeah. So that I can tell you, I was the it was probably a good thing I didn't do it. But the one that was the shiniest bauble was I was asked to be global head of sponsorship at Etihad Airways in their pomp when they were really sort of muscling up and taking on Emirates, et cetera, and that would have meant a relocation to Abu Dhabi, tax-free, blah, blah, blah. And it was a big checkbook on the table. Now, I'm not saying that job would have been better, but I do think that I got probably complacent in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think I fell into the trap of thinking, I'm not a banker. So if you're a banker, you could stay all your career at a company like that. When you're a sponsorship guy, you are an adjunct. You're not core to business. And I think, looking back on it, I went on too long, and I wish I'd sort of use a Tarzan metaphor. I think I was beginning to swing backwards on the vine rather than taking the next one going forward. So I think that would be the train I missed, weirdly, which was not leaving sooner, having done everything I could.
Right. Well, I was going to ask, this is what I was going to ask you because I thought you might say this. Would you have liked to have run a sport governing body? Yes,
I really would. And particularly, funny enough, Rog, particularly having had we've talked about this, one of the great joys about being part of the Are You Not Entertained family, not just the podcast, but the people we've had on primarily, is I've learned so much about the industry from all sorts of sides, from experts far bigger and greater than I. And I think that would have served me well to go into a governing body, into a rights holder, a club, a federation, whatever it might be, and taught them a little bit about the reality of the commercial model. Because in a sense, going back into Howden and doing sponsorship again, but having learned through you and through others about direct-to-consumer, around this whole sense of the importance of the unit of currency being the fan and engagement, I was a much better sponsorship practitioner at Howden than I was at HSBC because I'd learnt a lot. Therefore, it follows that I would like, and I still would, I would love to help fashion a sport because I do love sport like so many people do. And I think, both of us have been accused from sort of yelling at the top of our voices with frustration from time to time. when people ask about you or they ask about me, the one thing I can always say about Grant as well, but particularly you, is your authenticity and love of sport is absolutely, for those who know you, they understand its passion to you. So there is part of me that would go, well, yeah, I would do it for a rights holder. I think I've never been asked, but I would certainly look at it.
Well,
because
but see, it's interesting because let's explore that a little bit for a second. The commercial side, which is what you mentioned there, and we'll come back to that, I'm sure, in the next couple of questions. The changes in the commercial model and sponsorship and everything like that. But running a governing body, the commercial side often, Giles, is great. And sometimes it's the KPI that measures you now, because revenue is how you get measured as evaluation and everything like that. But it's not really the job. If you really cut it back, any revenue you make at a league or a federation, you're a non-for-profit and it just gets paid out to somebody else. So it's not as if you're paying dividends or anything like that. Running a sports governing body is pure politics. Alan Gilpin, who's just been on the captain's table, will know that very, very, very well. By the way, that was a great show. But he is a good example. Is running an organisation where he may have a view about what needs to happen to the sport, but has got a whole lot of people around that table that have got very different views or slightly different views or convicting views. And he has to, I always call it the equivalent of getting a supreme judge elected through Congress in America. It's just all compromise and horse trading. Do you think you've got the personality to not just tell somebody, do you think you would have been good at that and been able to manoeuvre, around a Premier League table where you've got all these different personalities and agendas? That's why I was asking the question. Do you think that suits you?
It's a great question, and quite possibly, particularly that political piece. My patience level might be perfect for the job. A friend of both of ours, who I saw very recently, who's retired and someone and is a great friend, is Richard Scudamore, and I think his brilliance was his ability to manage 20 chairmen of the Premier League.
Absolutely.
It is something, and he has skills of pulling people together, and empathy, I think, is a very rare gift. And I would...
He's almost unique. He's almost unique.
I would accept...
It's so difficult.
I would accept that depending on particularly the type of federation governing body, that I might not have all of the skills. I do occasionally show a little flash of Celtic ire. I think maybe I'd probably, if I had been rights holder side, maybe more it would have been in the kind of commercial end of it rather than necessarily in the political piece. But it's the one bit I haven't done. I did first third of my career agency. The last 20 years I've done buying sponsorships, and I'm 54 and nearly 55. So who knows? I'm a sponsorship doctor now. I mean, I love dressing up. It's obvious that I do sponsorship because I've been the captain and I'm still a captain. I'm now the sponsorship doctor. I think this is just a childhood of dressing up and wearing tights.
Seriously, Giles, I mean, I would love to see in a place like the WRU. I really would, because I know how much you love your Welsh rugby, and that is a basket case. I don't care what anybody thinks. I really don't care at this point. That it wouldn't be difficult to make it better. Put it that way.
Well, I'll tell you something that, again, this family of Are You Not Entertained has just been such a joy over the years. So I was asked a few years ago by Rhys Beer, who you introduced me to, who's had a variety of roles, but I believe now he's at the ECB, which is fantastic for him. He was on the marketing committee for Somerset County Cricket Club, which listeners who will know me know that one of my fan passions is Somerset. So I've been sitting as a non-exec on the marketing side for Somerset for a couple of years.
Lovely.
And just joyous for me, because I do give a shit about the place. The ghosts of my childhood are inextricably linked to Somerset. So yeah, I think I could. And maybe the older I get, maybe I'm getting a little gentler and a little less feisty. I don't know.
Well, I think anybody listening here, to bring him onto that kind of, Giles onto that kind of role, if not a bigger role, is a no-brainer. I think you would probably get a lot
Oh, this was the easy question for me, because I feel I've been the luckiest person in the world. As I say, I was no academic at school. I was not the Lothario heartthrob of all of the teams. I was just big and burly, and had quite good chat. And I think I bullshitted my way into most things, including university. But I worked for the first 12 years in various roles, but particularly within the WPP empire. And in my last couple of years at Hill & Knowlton, which was one of the big PR agencies then, it's no longer there, but it's part of WPP, I ran the sports team with, I had Andy Sutherland work with me, great friend, Andy. Again, lovely Andy. And I was approached by Martin Sorrell, who I'd met a few times through sort of earlier connections. I was still playing cricket. Would I come and play for WPP? He had a cricket team. He is possibly the most, probably the keenest amateur cricketer I have ever met. And in those days, I was probably 34 years old, and I was still bowling, I thought, very quick. I think I had deceptive pace. I was slower than everybody thought, but I was still thundering in. I had hair, I had a mullet, and my God, I could scare the shit out of people for at least the first over, and then they probably realised it's Buffet Morgan, help yourself, it doesn't matter.
Buffet Morgan.
And
fill up your boots.
Fill your boots, because this ball's going skyward. I had a magic day, I'll never forget it. I'd played a few times for Martin, and his son Jonathan, who's now one of the top captains in finance, was playing, and it was just great fun. And he did the best teas in the world, Martin. They were I love cake, so that was easy too. And I had a purple patch. I bowled one day like I haven't bowled since I was probably 17 years old. And I think I got 3 or 4 wickets. And I can remember so clearly Martin at mid-off, he insisted on fielding a mid-off, going, come on, Giles, keep going, let's knock them over. And he was so pleased with me. And this sort of big lumbering oath. And I talked to him at tea, and he was really interesting about the sports industry. And we talked, Martin, as you know, from your own dealings and knowledge of him, he's happiest when he's talking about work or sport or both. And we talked a lot about the sports industry. And I'm absolutely convinced that the reason I got the HSBC role, and I've never had this proved, it doesn't really matter, is I played that summer for Martin. I played quite well. And then out of the blue, I got a call from various people at HSBC. Would I come in? They were looking for a head of sponsorship. I went through an interview process, nothing to do with him, but I went through a process and I got the role in end of 2005, something like that. And then WPP were looking after all of HSBC's global advertising, and they had some bash on at the Royal Opera House in March or something like that. And I was invited along as one of the senior marketing folk at HSBC, and Martin was there, and it was all black tie, champagne, very special. And he asked how I was, and I said, very well. And he said, oh, I'm so glad it's worked out for you. And he looked at me in a way, and I realized that I had been made by the captain from mid-off of the WPP 11, who happened to be Sir Martin Sorrell. So that was my sliding door moment. And it's something, all of these things are lessons. I say, my wife and I, between us, as you know, have 6 kids. They're all in their 20s. And because they all have friends, and anyone who works in the sports industry becomes frightfully important for youngsters wanting to break in. So as you would, we get asked all the time about the sports industry. And if I can give any of the kids or children of people who are listening to this the advice, which is your network is everything. You never, ever know when it's going to repay you. And that wasn't about being digitally connected. That was about being connected in a physical sense. And I know that was my sliding door moment from being a half-decent sports PR guy with a good network. I'd grown up with Stevie Martin at Hill & Knowlton back in the early days. Lovely network. It was going nicely. That took me on to a whole nother level. And I'm absolutely certain that was my sliding door moment.
because you produced a couple of Yorkers at exactly the right moment.
And I was showing real grit, and I probably swore, and I was probably, I mean, God knows. I mean, any sensible batsman would have absolutely tanked me all over Dulwich, but they didn't seem to say it.
I don't actually believe that. I'm sure you were pretty close to unplayable when you were on your moment. But I thought you were going to say something else here. I thought, and that is a great story, by the way. Thank you for that. I thought you were going to say something about the sliding door was the realization that old sponsorship needed to evolve, and you, for 6 years, 7 years that I've known you, have been at the forefront in trying to get sponsorship and rights holders to understand what they need to do together. I want to ask you this then. In the time that we've known each other for 7 years, when you were at Howden for these 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was, do you think the pitches that you got from people that were looking for sponsorship had evolved well since the time you were at HSBC, or is it still the same old, same old?
Unfortunately, it's really the same old to an extent where television is still king. Eyeballs or impressions, I guess, in a social media case are it's a sort of size thing, isn't it? You asked if this is a male industry. Well, it may well be, because size seems to matter more than anything, rather than the quality of relationship, of engagement, and of known transaction. I know that if I had my time again at HSBC, just with the golf program that they had delivered, I would have taken such a much more in-depth, ingrained, creating relationships between golf fans and the bank through D2C to really get their information. I had a lovely time at Howden working with the guys at Locker Room to use that Lions shirt to get and onboard people into the Howden ecosystem. That's what finance directors want to see. They want to see that there is empirical shift. Yes, you can see visibility, and that has an importance in terms of raising profile. Hospitality is still engagement, but you've got to prove it. So it has to be done in a really empirical way. But the real shift has to be in that direct consumer for rights holders to understand that they just have a tribe of people that they need to know inside out. And a sponsor should come along who is after a tribe of people, and the two can marry. And one side has the emotion of the tribe and the other wants the tribe. And tribe to I'm now calling this as a sponsorship doctor, T2T marketing, tribe to tribe, because every rights holder, whether they're a village cricket team through to a global FIFA, you have a tribe. And that's not just sport. That's music, that's entertainment, that's museum. If you know the people who give a damn about your tribe, you sure as shit can find someone out there in boring corporate land who wants to engage with that. But you cannot do that with hooky data, which, as we've talked about for so many years, doesn't prove anything. So I think it's changing. I think people are doing a lot better now, particularly the younger guys coming through. They're hearing it. They are much more digitally nascent, but still there is a reliance on the big number rather than the quality number, and that's what needs to evolve quickly.
So, but help me understand this, Giles. Again, our 7-year journey. Over these years, many people, increasingly more and more, at conferences, on LinkedIn, in books, talk this game about, data informed. If you've got data, you can do this, what you call TTT. There's no shortage of information about what the playbook should be. There's no shortage about that. However, if you go to any of the agencies that in some way are trying to facilitate that, you mentioned one there, which I'll mention again because they sponsor the podcast Locker Room, Wade Colwood. But I'm thinking of other ones, people that I know well, without naming names because it would be unfair. But they would all say that sport talks the game, but at the end of the day, they'll drop the game in a second if they think they've got a chance of a big check.
And that's the trouble. So what Wade and various other people talk about, or I talk about, which is tribal integration, TI. Everyone's talking about AI. Well, let's talk about TI. Tribal integration is the value, and it's only semi-integrated. And the trouble is, I guess, is that the whole valuation for the sports sponsorship industry, particularly sport, came out of the 30-second ad. And that was the equivalent of a perimeter board being on for 30 seconds must have the same value as a 30-second ad in the 1980s when we used to have the jingles and all the rest of it. And that lies at the heart of the whole damn problem, because advertising in the 30-second television day was not about exposure. It was about telling a story. Think of Kellogg's. They'd have a song. You didn't see Kellogg's all the time. They took you on a journey, and at the end there was the sting of it's Kellogg's, it's Bran Flakes, or whatever it may be. But what happened in the sponsorship and sports industry, they used that 30-second and made it an equivalency. And that equivalency was massively, in my view, overpriced. It was nothing like advertising. Yes, there was awareness and there was value, but it was not nearly reduced enough. And that caused an inflation of rights that has lingered ever since. So you're right. Those who are charged with flogging sponsorship, and I absolutely won't touch flogging sponsorship, but I will advise people on what to buy and how to buy it, but not to get involved in any deal, simply because I think there is massive overinflation still that comes out of this old antiquated model, when it's much more valuable that you can start doing deals with sponsors about performance marketing, where you can do revenue share, where actually I think there's a lot more money to be made from brands if you can prove that you've made the sale. But we're still stuck in this AVE, as it's called, and it's done us no favours at all, because people just think, look at all the Premier League shirts. They can't sell any of them because people are sort of starting at, it's got to be 15 million quid starting point. And the big finance teams are saying, well, it's got to be 15 million a year, otherwise it's not worth it. I'm not
That's a great
it
example, Giles. So that, for people that don't know, betting sponsorship on football shirts is, I think, about to be banned in England. And that's one of the great indictments of English football, is that they haven't managed in any way to attract the quality of sponsor that you would think a top premier sports property could attract. They've got all these little squalid betting brands on front of shirt, which finally have been banned. Well, I'm not saying whether I'm for it or against it, but it's so revealing now, Giles, to see how much they're scrambling around for a replacement. And I'm sad, because we should be better than this. But I want to be fair to the people that are commercial directors and think, oh, he's having a go at me. I know how they get instructed. It's the old Charlie Munger thing, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. They're all bonused, incentivized on revenue. The whole industry is valued on a revenue number. It's not valued on the sophisticated things about travel and TI, you call it, that is the long-term play. And I just wonder, in your sport sponsorship, doctor, surgery now, do you really think you can break through those incentives and get people to say, yeah, I'm maybe even one day going to leave a wee bit of money on the table, like our old friends at the Augusta National, who have been doing it for years, and the rest of the sports industry have said, oh, they're wonderful, let me get back to my day job, I want 15 million for my shirt. How do you see it now that you're kind of going to lead this with a sponsorship surgery, Giles?
Well, what I'm doing at the moment, given that we are living in the most uncertain of times, is that I think far too much a reliance on acquisition of sponsorship and not nearly enough on retaining and looking after the people you've got. I think that sports are terrible at hanging on to sponsors, not all, obviously, but that first contract is when you get 50% drop-off. No one should be losing a sponsor if they've made that commitment. So that's my focus right now. what I would love the industry to understand better for all of us, and we're all on this learning curve together. You're right. We're not having a go from some lofty perch. We've all grown up with the same challenges. It's the expectation of, well, this advertising is worth this because that's the equivalency, therefore it is worth that. I think the brave brands and the brave rights holders, therefore, will be the ones that say, if you can demonstrate that this has demonstrably shifted my business, says Coca-Cola, and we've shifted X, Y, Z more, or whatever the metrics are, then you get bonused and commissioned. And that will be, I think, when the industry understands it's not a media buy. Yes, there is value to a media buy. I get it. But no one I've said this before on the podcast, if anybody is genuinely able to come onto our podcast and say, because they've seen a perimeter board selling a particular brand of beer and they went out and bought that beer, I'll eat my glass of beer. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Yes, there's some awareness. Where you get traction is when you engage with the fan. And that's what Howden, think about Howden. It's an insurance broker. I mean, it's marginally more interesting than banking, but it's a kind of grudge purchase. I need my house, I need the car done, etc. Use the magic of the Lions to a targeted demographic and activate a sponsorship properly. You're seeing a considerable uplift in new business. That is good sponsorship.
Well, let me throw this at you because that is a great example. So you know that during the Lions, I said to you, I'm not sure I'm liking these logos on the field, right? That's not the point. Then after the Lions, some people, rugby people, not me because I'm not qualified to do it, would say, oh, the Lions this year, I don't know what happened. It didn't cut through. And then Elliot said to me, you know how much business we did on the back of sponsoring the Lions? He wasn't worried, if I understood it correctly, about TV ratings or the view. But there's basically the people that signed up based on that. And I just think that's such a great lesson. Just such a great lesson.
I'm obviously entirely biased, very and blind to this, but the Lions sponsorship in time should be looked at, particularly from a sort of financial service insurance, i.e. the commodity, not easy to get penetration world, should go down as a copybook for other sponsors to follow. And I don't mean that arrogantly. I've learned so much along the journey on this podcast and the last 10 years. It wasn't really about the eyeballs. It was about the spirit. I remember saying to David Howden, we have to, as a brand that no one's ever heard of, they're going to see when that shirt is unveiled, David, even though your family name is on there, they're going to see three things. And we have to be prepared for this so that we can get what we want. The first thing is they'll see the crest, the Lions crest. And if you love rugby, the Lions crest is sort of mystical, sort of quasi-religious. It's a thing. It embodies rugby. So that's a tick. Then they're going to see the kit manufacturer, and hopefully it's a decent one, Canterbury Good, Nike, Adidas. If it's a really piss-pot one that no one's ever heard of, that kind of devalues the shirt. They didn't do that. And then I said to him, but when they see the Howden logo, and remember this is a couple of years before the sponsorship had got going, at best, they're going to think we're a kitchen company with a new logo. At worst, they're going to mind a company they've never heard of being in the way of this sacred place. So what do we do about it? You earn the right to be on that shirt, just like every player earns their right to be selected. And that means going into the grassroots. That means going after the spirit of the game where the consumers are. In our case, or Howden's case, it was about honouring every single club, 710 clubs who had ever produced a lion in history, giving them a plaque from Howden with the names of all of the players who'd come before to say, we honour what came before and we want to be part of your journey. The Rossin Park Sevens, the Melrose Sevens up in your former part of the world. The point is you have to earn it as a sponsor. You have to earn hearts and minds. And if you do that, it's not about television. It's about engagement, that people welcome you in because you've done your bit. And so many sponsors still are just going, no, it's an eyeball. I'm going to engage. No, you're not. So this is the thing. I'm not sure I will necessarily work for a brand again, and I don't mean that in a sulky way. I don't think I can better it. 5 Lion stores, it's been amazing. But I am very proud of what the team at Howden did and the agencies that we used to kind of put out there a 360 sponsorship that was corporate, it was brand awareness, it was employee engagement. Elliot will have tell you the amounts of CVs that came in for Howden because of the Lions sponsorship was off. That was unintended consequence. People wanted to come and work. And of course, then this direct to consumer, you make your money through the margin of car and house. Is this making a difference to a particular demographic? The Lions isn't that big a sponsorship globally. It's, as you know, it's only in a few markets, but it's a little ecosystem of how sponsorship can deliver. I'm proud of it because, like this podcast, if it helps people, then we're moving the thing along a bit.
Great, and all the best for the surgery of the sponsorship that you've created. I think it will be superb. The last question, which is my favourite: what person do you owe most to in life, but you didn't yet tell them enough?
Well, I really thought about this one, and actually, it was my son who told me to say this, and he's absolutely right. And I'm sure people have said their parents and all the rest of it, and I owe a debt of gratitude like we all do. But it's not them, and they're both no longer with us. I grew up in West London in Holland Park, and for those of you who know Holland Park, it is not it's not a cheap part of London. And I was a very lucky boy. My father had done very well, and we lived in some comfort. And my mother was pragmatic, grammar school girl. She did not want me to get carried away. So in this very large house that we lived in Holland Park, she wanted us to have lodgers and people living in who would help shape my sister and I growing up. And she also felt that she wanted people who'd live with us who she could trust as well, with 2 young children. And so she went to the Royal College of Music in South Kensington and put an ad up for a music student. Would they want to come and lodge with the Morgans in Holland Park? And there were a few applications, and one was from a gentleman called Llewellyn Rhayappen. And Llewellyn Rhayappen, she got it past my dad, who was old school. Llewellyn, he's bound to be Welsh, darling, said my mum. He's fine. Mum knew about him. And he arrived on the first day, and he was a South African boy. He was a black South African who was a music scholar, an opera singer and a pianist, aged 18. And my mother wanted, A, to have me learn music, but properly. But secondly, to be... there I was as a nice prep school to have people from different backgrounds. And Llewellyn ended up living with us for 9 years. And not only did he teach me, I couldn't read music, I still can't read music, but people who do know me know that I have travelled the world with my sports career, playing the piano in bars and pubs and post events and having the most almighty sing-songs. That gift came from Llewellyn, who taught me how to play music without reading music, which has been a lifelong gift. But there was more to that. Therefore, that taught me about colour and different people, vital for a boy who was growing up in real kind of tight-knit world. But he was also gay. And Llewellyn came out whilst he lived with us. And I remember so clearly, age 14, 15. And we're going back to 1984 here, just as AIDS was becoming the pandemic that it did. And he became a member of our family. And we looked after him. And he got AIDS in probably 91.
Oh, God.
And he died in 1994. He can't have been more than 25 years old. He was 6'3", and the day he died, he was 6 stone. We all were there at the hospital. And there has never been a human being that I've missed more than him, who taught me so many lessons in life and tolerance and music and humour, who couldn't have come from a different place to me. And I never got to say thank you. He never got to see me. I was 23, 24 when he died. But he is the person that I probably owe the most to. Nothing to do with my career, everything to do with my character. And I think I realised, as my son said it to me, how about Llewellyn? I think I probably missed him every day of my life.
That's fantastic. That really is a lovely, lovely story. Well done, Giles. And well done for this amazing conversation. You see, there was nothing to be nervous about, nothing at all. And I want to thank you for everything you've done for Are You Not Entertained? What I said at the start, I genuinely mean, you know that. It would have been different if you hadn't come on in season 2. And you've done really well with the lines, with what you're doing now. And I send you on your way with 3 Hail Marys, my friend.
Oh, Roger, it's been an absolute pleasure. It wasn't nearly as scary as I thought. Thank you very much.
Story of my life, that one. Take care.